not require disclosure. Identifying deals and the parties involved takes intense research. These transactions nevertheless make good money for a politician and his family and friends. Politicians are constitutionally obligated to make decisions that are best for the people they serve. These deals direct the politician's loyalty elsewhere. We are used to the typical revolving door corruption where government officials will carry out policies and then, after leaving office, take a job from those who benefited. But with most of the deals covered in this book, these politicians do not wait until they leave office. The accumulation begins while they are still serving. Rather than personal accumulation, the wealth flows to someone who is important in their life, a child, family member, or close friend. Those relatives are not required to disclose publicly how much money they are making or from whom. It is a pernicious form of what I call stealth corruption. Politicians are like the rest of us in that they avoid overtly criminal or publicly embarrassing behavior. Today, only the most arrogant, desperate, or stupid politician would take a direct payment from someone in exchange for a favor. Even without a clear exchange, savvy politicians are likely to avoid transactions that lead to a dramatic increase in their own net worth, lest they draw negative attention from an already skeptical public. So a new corruption has taken hold. It involves larger sums of money than ever before. Instead of stuffing tens of thousands of dollars into a freezer, they stuff multi-billion-dollar equity deals done in the dark corners of the world into family member bank accounts. As some political leaders are making influential decisions that affect everything from national security to our standard of living, large sums of money are funneled to their families and closest friends. Only the most naive would believe that these deals are a coincidence. This money often flows from foreign governments or oligarchs. The timing of these transactions and the amounts involved raise serious questions about the leader's integrity and decision-making. The high-level policy choices make the news, but the transactions quietly taking place below the surface do not. How do I define corruption? By corruption, I mean when officials abuse their positions for private gain. Corruption is the dishonest or fraudulent use of power for personal gain. It is often illegal, but not always. Some forms of corruption are technically legal, but most of us would still regard them as corruption. These cases, where abuse of power is most certainly occurring, and where the public appears to have no legal recourse short of voting the abuser out of office, are especially demoralizing to Americans. In the old days of the Tammany Hall machine, this was known as honest graft. George Washington Plunkett, who helped run the corrupt Tammany machine, explained that often what he called honest, legal forms of corruption were more profitable than the illegal forms. "There is so much honest graft in this big town that they would be fools to go in for dishonest graft," he famously said. In the world of finance, everyone understands the subterfuge of offshore assets. Corporations and high-net-worth individuals stuff their assets and money into obscure limited liability companies or bank accounts in places like Panama, Belize, and Cyprus. By doing so, it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to map out their transactions. Some do it to avoid taxes. Others are trying to obscure how and with whom they do business. When it comes to corruption in Washington, the same sort of thing is occurring. The American political class is offshoring their corruption. Sometimes politicians will literally offshore corruption by moving the location of the deal, the entities, and the players involved abroad. Other times they offshore corruption metaphorically by shifting the cronyism out of their own hands and into those of their children or a close friend to leverage from afar and avoid detection. Either way, the results are the same. Like the financier who puts his assets in a bank in Belize, it becomes very hard to track the flow of money and exchange of services. Politicians and their families are increasingly able to avoid public scrutiny and accountability for the selling of influence, and the sums involved are enormous. So, exactly how are politicians offshoring their corruption? First, oftentimes the foreign entity